Even though Tony and my MIL kept pressuring me, I couldn't have children. One day, when I came home, Tony, who had just returned from a business trip, was there with Beth holding twins.
Look! I had twins!
Congratulations! As I responded out of politeness, Beth made a shocking statement.
The father is Tony.
What? The two of them smiled cruelly.
Sorry, you're a defective infertile product. So, we don't need you anymore.
We're getting divorced because I'm marrying her. As Tony and Beth left, I stood there in shock when my MIL called.
I heard that Beth, who recently got divorced, came back to town, so I introduced her to Tony. She got pregnant right away. She's a perfect wife.
My MIL chuckled. Did you set them up?
Yes, I did.
Even after the call ended, I kept holding my phone. I was seething with anger. Tony, Beth, and my MIL. I'll make them regret putting me through this. They should be prepared. I am Martha, a 42-year-old housewife. I've been married to Tony, who is the same age as me, for 3 years. We met at a friend's wedding. I was drawn to his refreshing and clean look and bright smile. Tony also seemed interested in me, and we had a great conversation at the wedding reception. As we were leaving, Tony asked me out. We started dating with marriage in mind, and 2 years later, we got married. His family treated me warmly when we first met, but on our wedding day, Tony's mom clung to him and cried her eyes out. Her attachment to her son made the guests laugh uncomfortably. However, I had heard similar stories about mothers with only one child, so I thought as long as Tony and I got along, it would be fine. Little did I know what the future held a few years later. While we were dating, Tony treated me with such care, but he changed as soon as we got married. It's not that he started using abusive language. He started criticizing me and trying to make me obey him.
I care about you, Martha. I want to protect you from other men.
Using that excuse, Tony began to interfere excessively and tried to control me. The first thing he criticized was my clothes and makeup. When I was about to go shopping in a sleeveless dress, Tony frowned.
Are you trying to attract other men?
Huh. When I asked what he meant, Tony said, showing so much skin is disgraceful. Now that we're married, you should dress appropriately. I couldn't understand what was so disgraceful about a knee-length dress. But I asked anyway. So, what kind of clothes do you think I should wear? Tony pulled out a character-patterned sweats from the closet and handed it to me. Martha, you don't have any decent clothes. These are the only pants you have besides pajamas. What? Skirts, all of them are no good? Of course. What if the wind blows them up? There are lots of weirdos out there. You need to be more careful. When he scolded me seriously, I lost the will to argue. I guess this is what they call a difference in values. I couldn't bring myself to go out in loungewear, so I postponed the shopping trip. The next day, a huge pile of plain sweats arrived addressed to me. Yeah, this is just right. Since you're married to me, there's no need to dress up outside. Tony said cheerfully, and I finally protested. Then where should I wear all the clothes overflowing in my closet? Wear them at home. There's no need to show them to anyone but me. Oh, and you don't need makeup either, just sunscreen. Tony smiled. You should stop going to the hair salon too. If you really need a cut, I'll do it for you. I was horrified. Is he serious? But I use my salary for makeup and haircuts. It's a bit too much to say that. I timidly suggested, and Tony thought for a moment before concluding. Fine. I'll allow makeup and a salon. But from now on, you should dress as I tell you when you go out. You're my wife. All right. I agreed, but there was no way I could go to the downtown area dressed like I was going to clean the house. So I reluctantly adopted the strategy of changing into a dress in the station restroom before going shopping or meeting friends. Although he allowed me to go to the salon, Tony also complained about my hairstyle. Now that you're my wife, I don't want you to have a hairstyle that flirts with other men. He was so persistent that I gave in, changing my blonde hair to dark brown. I also cut my permed long hair into a short bob.
Martha, you've really changed.
An acquaintance I ran into was surprised, but I didn't feel like explaining, so I just smiled vaguely. Honestly, I didn't like being ordered around just because he was my husband. But, Martha, you're my wife, so I don't want you to stand out. I'm worried other men will be interested in you. When he expressed such concerns, it was hard to complain. In the end, I had no choice but to comply, convincing myself it was out of love. Moreover, Tony didn't like me meeting friends much either. So every time, I told him who I was going with and when I'd be back, and sent a group photo to his phone as proof. As for dinners involving men, even if they were my friends' husbands, Tony would get grumpy every time. When I participated, Tony always picked me up by car. Even though I assured him I'd come straight home, he was afraid I'd get close to another man. He didn't trust me.
Your husband really cares about you. You're newlyweds, after all.
I got tired of fending off such teasing remarks with a wry smile. Despite this, Tony always went out drinking on weekends, claiming it was for work. When I pointed out the inconsistency, Tony pouted. I don't go because I want to. It's for networking. If I cut back on these, it would affect my job and I'd get a pay cut. Don't you get it? Then he said with a half smile. If my salary gets cut, you'd be in trouble too, right? You earn less than me, after all. I was annoyed, but it was true, so I couldn't argue. The people I'm with are my boss and colleagues, so I can't take photos. But don't worry, I'm not doing anything shady. With that claim, I couldn't complain further. He worked late on weekdays and went out drinking on weekends. He was only home on Sunday nights, yet Tony wanted a child soon. Not because he liked children, but because his mom wanted a grandchild. I want mom to hold her grandchild while she's still healthy. Preferably a boy, but a girl is fine too. He casually uttered an arrogant remark. What? Didn't it happen this month either? I really want to fulfill mom's wish soon. I want to have a child soon too. Tony patted my shoulder sympathetically as I felt down. So, let's get on it. I'm counting on you. His detached attitude left me speechless. Did he think I could make a baby on my own? By our second year of marriage, with no sign of a child, I began to think natural conception might be difficult. I had been tracking my menstrual cycle and basal body temperature, and paying attention to my diet. I heard coldness isn't good for conception, so I ate warm chicken soup or stew, and drank ginger and herbal teas to warm my body. But Tony, even when I talked about these things, would just nod uninterestedly and go about his life as usual. Even though I repeatedly told him to cut back on smoking and drinking, he had no intention of doing so. On top of that, when I told him we should try to have sex 2 days before ovulation, he would plan fishing trips or nights out. Does he really want a child? I began to doubt. Meanwhile, my MIL was desperate for a grandchild. Her house was an hour's drive from our apartment. She invited us over every holiday, always with some excuse. Even though she could just call Tony, she always included me. My FIL was often away golfing or volunteering since retiring. My MIL, a housewife, only had the TV for company. Her hobby was gossiping with the neighborhood wives, and I was always roped in. Lately, she began weaving grandchild talk into her gossip, pressuring me to hurry up and have a baby. Listen, Martha. Mrs. Smith boasts about her 3rd grandchild. She's so arrogant. Mrs. Johnson's 2nd grandchild is also a boy. And her son lives with her. Isn't he so thoughtful? Don't you think so? Yes. My MIL wanted us to live with her, but Tony refused, saying it was too far from his job. She wasn't happy about that. So she probably wanted me to at least give her a grandchild to satisfy her. These conversations went on, and I wished Tony would join in, but every time we visited, he'd go out with friends. Tony works hard, he needs to see his friends too. Of course, my MIL defended Tony, but I was left stressed. MIL prepared the meals, so I did the cleaning up. She didn't treat me badly or make snide remarks. She just kept pushing for a grandchild. It's been 2 years since the wedding and still no baby? When will I hold my grandchild? You're not doing this to spite me, are you? Fed up, I snapped back.
No.
Oh, really? But at this rate, I'm worried I won't meet my grandchild in my lifetime. Right, Tony? Tony, playing with his phone, laughed and replied. Come on, Mom. Martha is trying her best. Right? Why did he act like it had nothing to do with him? I grew increasingly irritated with Tony and my MIL's interactions. However, in our 3rd year of marriage, Tony suddenly stopped talking about having children. At the same time, his weekend work and business trips increased unexpectedly. Previously, he sometimes initiated intimacy on weekends, but that stopped. Even when I cautiously suggested it, he brusquely turned me down, saying he was busy. The same change happened with my MIL. She used to go on endlessly about other people's grandchildren, but now she didn't mention it at all. One day, I arrived at my in-laws' house earlier than planned. As usual, I parked in a nearby coin-operated lot and walked to her house. Tony said he'd come after finishing some errands, so I went ahead alone. Then, I saw a woman in a loose dress talking familiarly with my MIL at the entrance.
I was so happy to hear that Beth, who got divorced, returned to town. Let's stay in touch. Thank you, I look forward to it.
At that moment, our eyes met, and my MIL's face suddenly stiffened. Beth, looking back at me suspiciously, smiled meaningfully and greeted me.
Nice to meet you. I'm Beth, I live nearby.
Oh, hello. For some reason, Beth rudely looked me up and down, then smirked.
Thanks for today, Beth. See you next time.
Though it was clear they were in the middle of a conversation, my MIL hastily ended it and rushed Beth out. Afterward, she invited me in and made tea, but she seemed distracted. When Tony arrived and joined us, my MIL took him to another room to have a private chat. When they returned, Tony had a big smile on his face and acted strangely all day. I met Beth again 6 months later. She came to our apartment with her newborn twins. Tony, who had been away on a business trip for 2 days, was already home when I returned from work. For some reason, he was with Beth.
Look! I had twins.
Congratulations. I responded politely to Beth, who was excitedly showing off her babies, then turned to Tony. Welcome back. By the way, why is Beth here? Beth answered in Tony's place.
Actually, I'm Tony's ex-girlfriend.
Oh, really? Beth, irritated by my calm response, snapped. Don't you get it? Are you stupid? What? When I asked, Beth dropped a bombshell.
The twins' father is Tony.
What? Before I could process what was happening, Tony wrapped his arm around Beth's waist and pressed his cheek to hers. I should have married you back then. I was so shocked by our breakup that I lost my mind and chose someone like this.
Hee hee, we can start over now. Unlike her, I get along with your mom and will be just fine.
Beth's confident demeanor made Tony smile happily. Mom's always liked Beth. She was thrilled when we got back together. And you got pregnant right away. And with twin boys. She praised you so much.
See? I'm different from someone else.
The two, now laughing, turned to me with malicious smiles.
Sorry, you're a defective infertile product. So, we don't need you anymore.
I'm tired of you always doing what I say. I'm divorcing you and marrying her. Tony told me as I stood there in shock. I'm kind, so I'll give you a week. Find a new place and move out. Here's the divorce papers. Sign and submit them. He placed the papers on the dining table, took Beth, and left. Their laughter echoed down the hallway of the apartment building. Am I being abandoned? Tony's strict instructions weren't out of love, but mere control. As I stared at the divorce papers, my phone rang. It was my MIL.
If you interfere with those two, I won't forgive you.
Her voice was sharp, intimidating me.
I've disliked you from the start. I never understood why Tony chose a dull woman like you.
Sorry for being dull. I apologized sarcastically.
If you had given me a grandchild, I would have accepted you as my daughter-in-law. But you couldn't, so you're a useless good-for-nothing.
My MIL spat out these hateful words.
I told Tony that Beth had returned to town. As soon as they reunited, they got back together. They really are a perfect match. I wonder why they broke up in the first place.
Did you encourage him to cheat? I asked, shocked, and my MIL shamelessly admitted it.
Yes, I did. I wanted Beth to be my daughter-in-law. She got pregnant right away, the perfect wife.
My MIL looked thoroughly satisfied.
So, it's all my fault because I couldn't get pregnant? Of course. A wife who can't have children is useless. You should be replaced by someone else.
She stated this outrageous logic without hesitation.
So, just submit the divorce papers and disappear.
After her tirade, she hung up. Even after the call ended, I held my phone, feeling dizzy with anger, frustration, and shame. What do they think I am? I can't let this go unpunished. I gritted my teeth and swore revenge. Tony, my MIL, and Beth. I'll make them regret putting me through this. They better be prepared.
Hey, haven't you moved out yet? It's been over a week.
Tony's calls and messages came daily, but I used my busyness as an excuse to delay. Even after submitting the divorce papers, I had many things to do. Another week later, I was ready and called Tony, Beth, and my MIL to the apartment. They arrived with annoyed expressions.
Beth wants to stay in my old apartment rather than the new one, so we decided on this place. So hurry up and get out. I feel bad staying with my in-laws forever. Since you submitted the divorce papers, just leave already. You seem to still have feelings for Tony, but he's Beth's now.
Tony and Beth sat next to each other, while my MIL sat across from them. After serving tea, I sat next to my MIL and spoke harshly.
I have no feelings for him at all. A man who lies, controls his wife, and fathers children with his mistress? No thanks.
Tony looked uncomfortable, probably because he knew it was true.
Anyway, you staying here is preventing us from moving in.
Oh, did you forget? My parents paid the down payment and half the purchase price for this apartment.
Really?
Did they? Tony blinked in confusion. I laughed at his forgetful mind. Despite his pride in earning more than me at a big company, he was rather clueless. We split the remaining cost. Since my parents and I contributed more, the apartment is in my name. It's my apartment. Beth and my MIL were stunned.
Tony, this is not what you told me.
Fine. You can keep this place. Beth, let's find another apartment. Tony said arrogantly, making Beth pout. I was looking forward to staying in your study. Fine. I'll ask my dad to buy us a penthouse.
You only lived here because of Tony's income. Acting so high and mighty, you evil wife, as I suspected. Is that all you wanted to say?
My MIL sneered, but I smiled confidently. No, the main point is coming.
The main point?
I gathered the evidence, so I called you here to report it. From a large envelope, I took out an investigation report and about 10 photos, laying them on the table. Then, Tony and Beth turned pale simultaneously and began to panic. They hurriedly gathered the photos and hid them in their pockets and bags, causing my MIL to grumble.
What was that?
I couldn't see properly. Don't worry. There are plenty more images that haven't been printed yet. I then displayed the images on my phone, showing them to my MIL as I slid through them. Tony and Beth screamed and tried to snatch the phone, but I brushed them off. When my MIL peeked at the screen, her face immediately changed color.
You too? You had other partners?
Her reaction was understandable. The photos showed Beth and Tony each arm in arm with different people, flirting and entering hotels. Mom, come on. Don't believe this.
Martha must have fabricated them. That's right. She may look quiet, but she's very sly.
I retorted to their frantic excuses. How could an amateur like me take such perfect evidence photos? I hired a detective agency to investigate. These are definitely real. If you doubt it, call and check with them. When I presented the detective agency's business card, Tony and Beth fell silent, looking like they had swallowed bitter pills. Unable to bear the silence, Tony blurted out.
Yeah, fine. I played around with people other than Beth. What I do with the money I earn is my business. Got a problem? Other men wouldn't leave me alone. It's not my fault. And Tony, you said I was your only one, you big liar.
Fueled by anger, Beth snapped back, and Tony wasn't backing down either.
You said you were thrilled to finally be with me. But is any guy good enough for you? Shut up!
My MIL shouted at them. She held her head, sighing in disbelief. I'm so disappointed in you too. I went through all that trouble for you, such a letdown. Seeing my MIL's despair, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. As I shook with laughter, Tony, Beth, and my MIL stared at me in bewilderment.
Sorry. I couldn't help it because Mael was pretending to be so proper. Oh really? This is all because you didn't support Tony as his wife, so he cheated on you.
My MIL now directed her spite at me, showering me with her usual petty remarks.
If you had been a proper wife to Tony and had children, he wouldn't have looked at Beth. It's all your fault.
She had introduced Beth to Tony and encouraged the affair, yet she had the gall to say this. As I stood there speechless, Tony and Beth joined in, emboldened.
Yeah, it's all Martha's fault. You couldn't satisfy your husband. You couldn't have kids. No wonder he got bored. Poor Tony.
Yeah. By the way, MIL, you're quite active yourself, aren't you? I spread another set of photos on the table, and MIL gasped in shock. Tony and Beth, peering at the photos, exclaimed in disbelief.
Whoa, seriously? Mom's got a guy too. Wow. An affair with a European? Impressive, MIL.
I smiled at the stunned Tony and Beth. I also have audio recordings of your dates.
Oh. I want to hear them.
They're not indecent, are they? It seems a detective recorded them at a cafe. Ignoring my MIL's flustered state, I played the voice recorder.
Francois. I'll have the money ready soon, so please wait.
Her excited tone was clear in her voice.
My son's new wife's parents are rich, so I'll flatter them to get money. Beth is so simple, it's easy.
Thank you, darling. I'm glad. Now my sister can have her surgery. I love you. In halting English, my MIL responded happily.
It's fine. About $30,000. I love you too.
Tony and Beth widened their eyes and stared at my MIL. Who is this Francois? Is he trustworthy?
Don't look so worried, it's fine.
My MIL laughed it off.
He's an Italian here for work. We met on social media. He's poor and couldn't afford surgery for his sister's rare disease, so I covered the cost.
She spoke proudly.
He likes mature, nurturing women like me. When I gave him $30,000, he cried with joy. He's a good guy.
As my MIL looked dreamy, Tony wore a hopeless expression. Where do I start?
Francois is a French name, right? Everything about him is probably a lie. He sounds like a con artist, targeting women for money. Don't talk bad about Francois.
My MIL barked, making Beth's temples twitch in anger.
So, you were supporting him with the money you got from pushing me and Tony together? Unbelievable. You old hag.
Calm down, Beth. Tony tried to soothe the furious Beth. Thanks to Mom, we got back together. I'll apologize on her behalf. Can you forgive her?
Tony.
Tony patted Beth's head as she still looked dissatisfied, then smiled. I got distracted by other women, but I still love you, Beth. You gave me my children. So, let's make up. Beth smiled softly at his words. You're right. I was wrong too. I still love you the most, Tony. Let's get along from now on. After staring at each other for a while, they both turned to me. Are we done here? We need to go. We have to pick up the kids from the babysitter. We're busy with the twins. You wouldn't understand, being dumped by Tony. I looked up at the clock on the wall. Just wait a bit longer. They should be here soon. As I said this, the doorbell rang right on cue. I checked the intercom and invited the guests in. Tony, Beth, and my MIL looked puzzled at the two men who appeared. Dad? And who is this? Tony glanced at the older man behind his father and asked. Don't you remember? He's the doctor we consulted for your infertility test. Your dad introduced him. Oh. Tony's face showed he remembered, while Beth looked flustered.
You had an infertility test? You didn't tell me.
Didn't I mention it? Tony answered lazily, while Beth pouted. Why are you here? Tony asked, puzzled. I answered on behalf of the doctor. I went to speak with him directly, but you were busy with Beth and the twins. So, I explained the situation to your dad and asked him to come. Tony frowned at my explanation. The doctor met my gaze. When I nodded, he sighed slightly and began to speak. The truth is, Tony, you're infertile. After a moment of frozen silence, Tony and my MIL shouted simultaneously. What?
Are you serious?
Under our gazes, the doctor frowned and continued, clearly uncomfortable. The problem wasn't with Martha. Tony, your sperm count is too low. There's no way you could have children. The doctor placed the test results on the table, and my MIL, Tony, and Beth all stared at them intently. After a moment, Tony and Beth screamed.
Me? No way! You've got to be kidding me. This wasn't part of the plan.
Panicking, Beth clawed at her hair, her voice rising to a shriek.
I never thought he was infertile. This ruins everything. What am I supposed to do now?
Plan?
I chose to get back with him because an employee at a big company is more promising than some pretty-faced part-time model. But this is awful. I was deceived.
In her frenzy, Beth blurted out things we didn't even ask about. Hearing this, Tony's face twisted in fury.
Hey! We broke up because you cheated, but I forgave you. And you did it again? I believed we could start over.
Tony clenched his fists, growling at Beth in a low voice.
What? You were cheating too. You have no right to blame me. It was just a fling. It's not like I fathered children with them.
The childish argument left me, my FIL, and the doctor in disbelief. We didn't even feel like intervening, just watching the scene unfold.
I dumped the others and chose you to be the father. You should be grateful, not complaining.
So, it wasn't my fault we couldn't have children, it was Tony's. The infertile defect Beth mentioned wasn't me, it was Tony. I cut in sharply, and Tony and Beth glared at me with resentment. Ignoring them, I echoed the words my MIL and Beth had thrown at me before. MIL, you also told me that a wife who can't have children is worthless. A husband who can't have children is just as useless, right? I smirked at my MIL, who bit her lip in frustration and glared back at me. Instead of lashing out at me, my MIL turned to the yelling Tony and Beth and thundered at them.
I believe those were Tony's kids. I can't forgive this. And you, Tony. Falling for such a vile woman. Divorce her immediately. I don't need you to tell me to divorce him. Don't act so high and mighty. You cheated too, old hag.
As the three of them descended into chaos, my FIL sighed deeply. He approached me and bowed his head. I'm sorry for the trouble my wife and son have caused. When I investigated, I found my wife's lover was also seeing other women. Gathering evidence took some time. He addressed Tony, my MIL, and Beth, looking exhausted. Let's go home. we'll discuss the rest there. With the doctor's help, my FAL calmed the three of them down, got them into the car, and took them back to their house. The day after I submitted the divorce papers, Tony and Beth got married. However, within a week, they divorced. Both complained to friends and acquaintances that they never wanted to see or hear from each other again. Ignoring Tony and my FIL, my MIL finally listened to her relatives. Realizing she had been scammed, she desperately tried to recover the money she had spent, but the police informed her the scammer had disappeared. Having used my FIL's retirement money without permission, she was handed divorce papers. Though she resisted and cried, she eventually gave in. It was also discovered she had accumulated debt in Tony's name, leading to a big fight with him. My FIL and Tony left the house, leaving my MIL to live alone in their large home. After divorcing Beth and moving into an apartment, Tony paid me alimony in one lump sum and continued working as if nothing had happened. However, when a local acquaintance who had transferred to his company spread the story, his reputation took a hit. The tale of his affair with his ex and the quick divorce reached his boss's ears, leading to a demotion. Tony's salary was significantly reduced, and with his newfound poverty, his former lovers lost interest. He now spends his days desperately trying to repay the debt his mother accrued. Beth, who returned to her parents' home after the divorce, lived leisurely with her twins. She paid me alimony in a lump sum with her parents' help, then told them the marriage had failed. But when I sent a certified letter revealing her multiple affairs and uncertain paternity, her parents were furious and threw her out. She reluctantly moved into a shabby apartment, placing her twins in daycare while working multiple part-time jobs, struggling day and night. With no one to rush me into having children or impose their preferences on my clothes and hairstyle, I grew my hair long again and dyed it as I liked. I bought cute clothes at my favorite stores and enjoyed meals with friends once more. Feeling lighter and refreshed, I lived each day happily. Although the marriage was a failure, I learned a valuable lesson about the pain of being deceived by superficial kindness. From now on, I intend to enjoy both my work and private life to the fullest, without anyone's approval.